Welcome. If you're looking to really get to grips with complex topics quickly, you're in the right place.
That's what we aim for?
Today, we're tackling something that probably affects furniture you own or have bought. We're looking at the impact of the Trump administration's tariffs on the U.S. furniture industry starting back in 2018.
Yeah, and we're grounding this discussion in some solid analysis. We're drawing from an article by Chris Lenz, he's a factoring specialist, published May 2025, so a retrospective view.
Exactly. It gives us a chance to see the actual consequences.
Right.
So our mission for this deep dive, to really understand the shifts, the ripple effects these tariffs caused in the furniture world.
Right. Where should we start? Maybe the landscape before the tariffs.
Good idea. Set the scene. What did the U.S. furniture market look like, say, in 2017?
Well, the big story, and Lenz points this out clearly, was China's dominance.
Dominance how?
They were the #1 exporter of furniture to the U.S. by a long shot. We're talking over half, more than 50% of all furniture imports.
Wow, over 50%. That's huge. So the U.S. market was really deeply tied to that one source.
Absolutely. It wasn't just about, cheap sofas.
Yeah.
The whole supply chain from raw materials to the showroom floor was heavily reliant on that global manufacturing model, especially China.
We talk about supply chain, meaning that whole complex network, right?
Yeah.
Getting wood, metal, fabric, making the piece, shipping it.
Precisely. It was all optimized for low-cost production overseas. That was just the way things were done, standard practice.
Okay, so that's the baseline. Then 2018 arrives, and bam, tariffs. What did that actually involve?
It wasn't subtle. The administration rolled out tariffs on a whole range of Chinese goods. And for furniture, this meant new taxes, essentially ranging from 10% up to 25% on certain items.
10 to 25%. That's not pocket change. That must have sent shockwaves.
Definitely. Lenz calls it a shockwave, and that feels right.
So who felt the pinch first?
Pretty much everyone down the line. The importers bringing the furniture in, obviously their costs shot up immediately. Then the retailers buying from those importers, their inventory costs jumped. And even American manufacturers felt it if they used imported parts.
Like specific components.
Yeah, things like plywood, metal frames, mechanisms for recliners, stuff like that. And of course, finished pieces too, sofas, beds, tables coming straight from China.
So faced with these sudden cost hikes, what could businesses actually do? I mean, you can't just flip a switch.
No, you can't. Lenz basically outlines 3 main paths, though none were easy.
Okay, what were they?
1, eat the cost, just absorb it, and accept lower profits.
Ouch. Especially for smaller players.
Right. 2, pass the cost on. Raise prices for consumers like you.
Which has its own risks. People might just not buy.
Exactly. Or 3, try to change where you get your stuff from. Restructure the supply chain.
That third one sounds logical, but complicated.
Hugely complicated. Lenz really emphasizes this. Finding new suppliers in different countries, vetting them, setting up new shipping, new logistics. It takes serious time.
How much time are we talking?
Months, potentially years. It's not just finding a factory. It's building relationships, ensuring quality, managing the whole transport process. Plus, it often requires significant upfront cash.
Yeah, I can imagine. And you mentioned smaller businesses earlier. This must have hit them harder, right? The whole restructuring thing.
That's a key point in the analysis. Smaller firms often just don't have the capital or the global connections to pivot that quickly. They were definitely more vulnerable than the big guys.
Okay, so businesses are scrambling, costs are up. How did this filter down to the average person shopping for a new couch or dining table?
Well, it put retailers in a really tight spot. They had to consider raising prices because their own costs were higher. But the furniture market was already super competitive, right?
Yeah.
Especially with online giants.
Oh, yeah. You can price compare instantly online from dozens of places.
Exactly. Lenz mentions Wayfair, Amazon. These big e-commerce players already operate on different models, often lower overheads. So these tariffs just added another layer of pressure, particularly for traditional, brick-and-mortar stores.
Makes sense. It squeezed them from both ends, rising costs and fierce competition.
Pretty much, yeah.
Now, one of the arguments for the tariffs was boosting American manufacturing, bringing furniture jobs back. Did we see a big Made in America renaissance?
The picture there is nuanced, according to Lenz. There was a bit of an uptick in domestic production.
Oh, really? In what areas?
Mostly in niche segments, things like high-end custom furniture or upholstered goods where maybe shipping costs were already a bigger factor.
So not across the board?
Not really a widespread boom, no.
Yeah.
Lenz does mention some specific companies like Bassett Furniture, Vaughan Bassett reporting more interest in their U.S.-made lines, which is notable.
Okay, so some positive signs for certain companies.
Yes, but his analysis suggests these were more the exception. For the bulk of mass-market furniture, the economic realities still favored offshore production.
Why is that? Even with the tariffs making imports more expensive.
Well, tariffs raise the price of imports, but they don't magically solve other issues. Things like higher labor costs in the U.S. compared to many parts of Asia.
Right.
And also the sheer scale of the manufacturing infrastructure that had been built up overseas over decades. You can't replicate that overnight. Plus, the specialized labor force needed. It's complex.
So the ecosystem wasn't really there for a massive, immediate shift back.
That seems to be the takeaway. The incentives weren't quite strong enough to overcome those fundamental structural factors for most of the industry.
Okay, so if a big return to U.S. manufacturing wasn't the main story, how did the industry adapt strategically, long-term?
The biggest strategic shift Lenz identifies is diversification.
Meaning
Companies realized putting all their eggs in the China basket was risky. So they actively started sourcing from a wider range of countries.
spreading the risk. Makes sense. Any particular countries benefit?
Yeah, he mentions Vietnam, Malaysia, even Mexico is becoming more important suppliers for the U.S. market. Companies started building relationships there.
Interesting. So it wasn't just about leaving China, but about having more options.
Precisely. Don't be reliant on just one source. And Lenz adds that other things, like the COVID pandemic and, general geopolitical uncertainty, only accelerated that trend. Resilience became the buzzword.
Beyond just changing where they sourced from, did they change how they operated?
Yes, absolutely. There was a big push toward digitization.
Digitization, how does that help with tariffs on physical goods?
Think about efficiency. When costs are up and competition is fierce, you need to be smarter, leaner. So Lenz points to more investment in things like inventory management software.
To avoid holding too much expensive stock?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Better demand forecasting using real-time data. And of course, strengthening their own e-commerce capabilities to sell directly and understand customers better.
So using tech to manage the volatility.
That's a good way to put it. Managing volatility and squeezing out inefficiencies.
So fast forward to now, to Lena's analysis from 2025. Many of those tariffs are still in place, right? Even under the Biden administration.
That's correct. Many remain.
So what's the lasting legacy? Has the industry just adjusted to this new reality?
Lays argues, yes, it's kind of a new normal. The key takeaways for companies now are flexibility, agility, and really focusing on risk mitigation. Those aren't optional anymore. They're critical for survival.
So the tariffs acted almost like a catalyst, forcing changes that might have happened eventually anyway, but much faster.
That's very much the sense you get from the article. He calls the tariffs a significant stress test.
A stress test. I like that.
Yeah, it revealed the weak spots, especially that over-reliance on China, and it basically forced companies to adapt their global strategies.
And the outcome. Some adapted better than others.
For sure. Those that moved quickly to diversify, to invest in tech, they seem to be more resilient now. Others who were slower, maybe hoping things would go back to the way they were, they're likely still facing more significant challenges.
So the big picture here isn't just about furniture prices, though that's part of it for consumers. It's a real-world case study in how political decisions on trade can fundamentally reshape an entire industry.
Absolutely. In a globalized world, these policy choices have deep, far-reaching consequences, forcing businesses to constantly reassess and adapt. It really underscores how quickly the ground can shift under your feet.
It really does. A fascinating look at how policy hits the real economy. Okay, so here's something for you, our listener, to think about. How do these kinds of trade policy decisions, even focused on one sector like furniture, ripple outwards? How do they ultimately touch global supply chains and maybe your own wallet or choices?
And maybe consider what other industries might be going through similar, maybe less visible shakeups right now because of shifting trade winds and political choices.
Definitely food for thought. We'll leave it there for this deep dive.